The lockdown liar. I remember how the fire alarms activated in the hallway and our classroom simultaneously. I've described that sound to my therapist a few dozen times at this point. The strobing light and the ear-splitting klaxon urged us all to move outside. Instead, our teacher claimed that the alert was for a lockdown. Ms. Wendover strained her voice over the sound of students and teachers in the hall. She announced that we were all staying put, and blocked the door with her body while locking it. She then shouted to her class,
"There's no fire. This is a test of the new lockdown system."
We smirked at each other and whispered playfully. The students in Ms. Wendover's classroom all thought that this was just another fire drill. We thought that this relatively new teacher was making a fool of herself by innocently misunderstanding the situation. We would soon learn that this was nowhere near the truth. Ms. Wendover produced a small steel barricade from the bottom drawer of her desk. I recognized it as a reinforced door jamming device. It was designed to quickly seal a room's entryways during lockdown situations. Ms. Wendover wedged the sturdy piece of metal under the locked entrance like a doorstop. She then collected her purse from its place slung over the back of her chair, and dragged the chair over to where the fire alarm in our classroom was continuing to screech. She stood atop the chair while we all watched her. The students still seemed mostly at ease. We chatted idly in our bewildered amusement. Ms. Wendover then pulled a large claw hammer out of her bag and struck the alarm with a vicious amount of force. The smirks and whispers among the class all stopped abruptly. We realized that Ms. Wendover hadn't simply made a mistake. She continued striking the alarm until it was completely smashed apart. It was soon rendered silent, battered to countless pieces on the linoleum floor. Outside our classroom, the sounds of the evacuation in the hallway were becoming fainter. I remember asking meekly, "Can't you hear all the other kids leaving, Ms. Wendover?" In my confusion at what was happening, I still clung to some hope that there had been some kind of misunderstanding. "I think we're supposed to be outside."
"You're not supposed to be outside,"
Ms. Wendover snarled. She descended from her place atop the chair and marched toward me. The teacher brought her face very close to mine.
"Each and every one of you all are exactly where you're supposed to be."
Before I explain any further, I should tell you about the symbol that Ms. Wendover always wore. Each day, she sported a pendant around her neck that displayed a strange character at its center. The character looked to me like an ideogram. It was a simple rendering that seemed as though it were meant to represent a more complex picture. The ideogram was always emblazoned prominently on Ms. Wendover in one form or another. Besides her pendant, she sometimes wore the same character on various other pieces of jewelry. They all looked to be handcrafted. I remember that sometimes she wore polished stone earrings with the symbol painted on each side. We never saw Ms. Wendover without the ideogram on some part of her daily outfits. Some students joked that maybe it was the logo for a fashion brand that our teacher was trying to start. If she heard us talking this way, Ms. Wendover would just smile dryly and tell us we were wrong. The emblem was actually more like a spiritual icon, she would explain tersely. Eventually, she stopped answering our questions about it entirely. If we continued to press her about it, she would grow harsh and impatient. Eventually, we just gave up trying. The symbol itself was a rough, brushstroke oval with two branching fractures marked across the shape's interior. To me, it looked like an egg that was in the process of hatching. I would later learn that it was meant to symbolize a round charcoal ember. The branching lines on the oval represented red-hot hairlines of fire smoldering inside the coal. Years after the events of the lockdown lie, I would finally realize the meaning behind this image. I remember that while we were trapped inside the classroom with Ms. Wendover, Someone was knocking frantically on the door from the hallway outside. I recognized Mr. O'Connell through the small glass viewport in the door.
"This is not the way to handle what's going on,"
he was shouting.
"For the love of God, Vera."
Mr. O'Connell began wheezing, and soon he was coughing too hard to continue. I suddenly realized that I could see a dark haze in the air outside of the classroom. This wasn't just a drill or a false alarm. Without a doubt, real fire was spreading through the school. Ms. Wendover rushed to the door and began taping construction paper over the glass window through which O'Connell was still trying to beg her to bring us outside.
"This won't make anything better,"
he insisted. Ms. Wendover said nothing. We couldn't see through the window anymore, but the sound of Mr. O'Connell coughing and then moving away from the door toward fresh air made it obvious that he could do nothing to help us. We were alone with our teacher once again. By this point, several of the more daring students were trying to pry open windows. Another few rushed for the locked door. Our teacher was prepared for these attempts to escape. The windows were riveted shut. They hadn't been that way yesterday, but now they were firmly sealed by metal fasteners bolted through the window's frame. The students working to pound the door open prompted Ms. Wendover to reveal a pistol from her handbag. Our teacher pointed the gun at an overhead light fixture near the back of the classroom and fired once. The room got suddenly darker as students screamed and glass rained down. Ms. Wendover once again had our undivided attention. She quickly ushered those trying to force their way out back to their seats. I was racking my brain for a solution. Any chance for a way out would suffice. Hoping to gain our teacher's trust and maybe even distract her, I raised a trembling hand in order to pose a question. "Ms. Wendover?" I asked meekly. Her eyes rolled placidly in my direction, and the barrel of her gun followed her gaze. She did not speak, but I ventured that her silence had granted me permission to continue. I realized that I could not find any words to make a compelling statement. Stammering out all that I could think of to say, I naively asked, "Why is this happening?" Ms. Wendover settled back into her seat with the handgun still gripped in her hands. Once again, she had secured the class as her captive audience. Our teacher began to tell us about why we were all here today. She told us countless things while we were being held hostage inside of that burning building. She used phrases like human sacrifice and demonic possession as though these were perfectly rational ideas. She told us that she had telepathic sight, and that she watched us while we were alone in our rooms. Gesturing playfully with the gun, Ms. Wendover insinuated that one student in particular was a secret pervert. The irony of such an accusation was not lost on me.
"And you?"
she added, gesturing to me with her weapon as well as a pointed finger from her empty hand.
"You'll be a special sacrifice for the inferno."
Smoke from the hallway was now dribbling up from underneath the door. The steel barricade had previously kept most of the smoke out, but now the air outside was too polluted. Everyone around me was coughing and crying. I'm sure that I was too, but I don't remember all the details exactly. The main thing that seared into my brain from this part of that day is the image of Ms. Wendover sitting there with her gun leveled at us. Our teacher's eyes were glassy, and her face was blank with a faraway expression painted across it. If the smoke was bothering her, then she didn't let it show for even an instant. Since that day, I've learned that the glowing ember is a symbol for followers of Baal-Deva. In demonology, Baal-Deva is known as the inferno that consumes children. Some texts also refer to him as the ravenous flame. These titles dates back to 1312, when 48 children were lost to a fire in Dresden. It's believed that sacrifices were made to Baal-Deva before this point, but it's only when the ritualistic sacrifices stopped that the fires began. In the demon's lore, the twin traditions of inferno and death to the innocent have become intertwined. The firefighters were finally arriving outside our classroom on the day of the lockdown lie. I remember my relief to hear their axes biting hard into the wooden door of the classroom's exit. I also recall my fear that they would be shot dead as they worked. Ms. Wendover fired through the door. I'm not sure if the bullet hit anyone, but the door was already collapsing. Whether or not anyone was injured by the shot, the door finally splintered apart. The firefighters fell back and police wearing respirators poured into the classroom. Ms. Wendover fired a shot that winged into the ceiling overhead without hitting anyone. It sent a shower of insulation down instead. The police dogpiled onto our teacher and forced the gun out of her hands. She thrashed and clawed at them the whole time. Despite the growing roar of the flames in the hallway and all the commotion, I can remember hearing her rage-filled scream pierce through the discord and chaos. Her anger rang out as clear as a bell. Students were cowering in corners, crying, screaming, and begging God not to die. I remained frozen in my seat. My mind had gone blank from the overwhelming sense that I wasn't in control of anything anymore. The police were working to drag Ms. Wendover out of the classroom. They were telling us in hard voices not to move and not to panic. The last thing I heard my teacher scream before she disappeared will stay with me forever. Locking eyes with mine, she bared her teeth and made her final announcement to the class.
Sooner or later, each and every one of you is going to burn.
Her eyes searched my face as she lapsed into silence, and one of her restrained arms contorted roughly to point a finger in my direction. Then she was gone. I haven't been able to find all the rules of the cult and its beliefs. Sometimes one source will contradict another one. One idea that's made very clear is that being chosen for sacrifice to Baal-Deva is a curse that spreads like wildfire. This is apparently by design. If you help the curse spread, then you become like the glowing ember. You are slowly consumed rather than obliterated all at once. An especially old text I found says that something as insignificant as having a pointed finger cast in one's direction is all that it takes to be marked for sacrifice. One source I found says that simply learning Baal-Deva's name increases a person's chance of being marked by the inferno. Ms. Wendover pointed at me 3 times before she was dragged away, and repeatedly told me that I'd burn. It's clear that our teacher intended to serve as a glowing ember. She was trying to spread the wildfire, but did she really put the curse on me? If any of this is true, then I'm sorry for even telling you my story. It's been 8 years since the lockdown lie and the fire at school. Only recently have I started to feel confident enough to reflect on that day in detail. I tried to look up Ms. Wendover, but I couldn't find any local news articles about her. The more I searched, the more I realized why. Although everyone at the school knew her as Vera Wendover, the woman's legal name is actually Gillian Lamprey. Lamprey's been in a psych ward for the 8 years since she set that fire. Her first assessment for supervised release is in 6 months. The reports that I can find describe her as having been a model patient during her commitment stay. It's hard for me to believe. I think back to Ms. Lamprey's claims about telepathic sight, and about how she had searched my face so diligently with her eyes while the police were dragging her away. She promised me that I'd burn. Sooner or later, she told me. I wonder if Ms. Lamprey's really learned to let go of her psychotic tendencies. Or instead, has she merely gotten better at making plans that no one can predict? Recently, the ember symbol has been appearing in my personal life. I'm an adult now, and trying to raise a toddler with my partner. I shouldn't be thinking about old traumas, but I can't seem to stop. My child was finger painting. When I went to check on her, the symbol was there on the page. The image was rendered in perfect proportions to the one I remember from all those years ago. This morning, the cream that I poured into my unstirred cup of coffee formed the glowing ember and then diffused into nothing. There's always a chance that these sightings are a matter of coincidence. I'll admit to the occasional paranoid thought. Still, I think that Ms. Lamprey may have known more about real occultism than most people give her credit for knowing. I saw the ember in my dreams last night. That's a big part of why I felt the need to finally type this whole story out for people to read. I don't want to be sacrificed to Baal-Deva, but if the old texts are correct, then I never had a choice. I was sold to the inferno many years ago, and such a price never goes unpaid. I won't pay this curse forward. I refuse to. I'm smoking a cigarette on my front porch right now. As I consider the tiny ember that's inches from my hand, it's tempting to get things over with.